Okay, we'll call to order the October 26, 2016 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And our first item is roll call.
Commissioner Height.
Present.
Commissioner Teta.
Here.
Commissioner Poland.
Here.
Commissioner Schernick.
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flagg. Here. Commissioner Bruneau.
Here.
Okay, and it looks as though we have Council Member Bonnie Finley coming down the stairs to join us shortly. Communications from Don Burchett, Principal Planner.
We have none tonight, thank you.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so we'll open up the public invited to be heard section. Is there anybody signed up, Jane? Nobody is signed up. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak? Seeing none, we will close the public invited to be heard section. Next is approval of the minutes from the September 21st, 2016 meeting. Anybody who was present at that meeting?
I move that we approve the August 17, 2016 meeting minutes.
Okay, there's a motion to approve.
Isn't it for September?
Yeah, yes, for September 21st, 2016.
Ooh.
He moved that we.
Oh,
approve the
sorry.
August.
Oh, you said August?
Well, because that was...
Ah.
Sorry, I move that we approve the September 21st, 2016 regular meeting minutes.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Height. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously by those who are in attendance. So that would be, I think, 5-0. Next item is the Kylo Health Medical Office Building Conditional Use Site Plan and Common Open Space Variance with Planner Ben Ortiz.
Chairman Schernick, we do have the applicant here, and they're prepared to make a presentation. Would you prefer that they go first?
Sure. Let's have the applicant go first.
Hello, my name is Joel Siemens with Park Engineering, and I have been asked to represent the client. I am the civil engineer for the project, and I've helped Don Macy coordinate the different sites for the 20 acres here at Lot 7, Longmont Business Center. The part of the presentation is there's a request to understand the building a little better. That's not the variance in itself, but by request of the planner, I have brought said items, and so we're going to open one at a time. The first is a three-dimensional rendering of the building, and I think there's 5 different slides on that, so you can scroll through. And the architect in Boulder has stated this is the latest they have on the building. The materials might change slightly, so it's not the precise, because they still are looking for tenants right now, but this is their latest, and they have put a lot of detail into these renderings and elevations. I think that's maybe just a portion of it. If you maximize it, will that bring it? No. See if you scroll around, because I think that might, yeah, there you go. There we go. So we'll pan and zoom. There we go. And that's the last of the 5. And I can leave this with Ben, or I can email this information to anyone. As well, there are 2 elevation sheets that were part of the cusp, as we call it, the CUSP. Did we scroll? But it is part of your packet, so it's sheets 12 and 13, and I was just going to illustrate them on the PowerPoint. But the reason we're here today is because with the slight changes in the parking, there was a small shortage in the open space contingent, and so we wanted to address that. And Ben's been our planner since the beginning on this project, so he understands the history of what all is entailed. And some of the recommendations with this lot specifically was to, if we were getting to that just short of the percentage, we could bring a lot of the trees and bring it a little higher density on the trail side, because there's an Outlot S that's adjacent before we come to Highway 119. And maybe if we'll flip over, Ben, maybe we can take a look at that. Okay. Yes. Look at me go. All right. So there's a lot 7C adjacent to that, to the immediate southeast is the Outlot S. And sorry, Joan, if I blind you with the thing.
Actually, here, you can use this.
Oh, awesome. Even better. Okay. Great. So in this area in here is the trail, the concrete trail that has been poured actually, and will be landscaped shortly. I don't know if this season or the next. But then Highway 119 is right here. And so the recommendation is, if we do come slightly short with landscape and open space with this lot specifically, we're encouraged to plant a little more dense, and so there's more of a buffer between the highway and Lot 7C. And so that's exactly what we did. There are information in the variance requests and the review criteria that we coordinated with the landscape architect to show how exactly this was to be done as far as trees and shrubs and whatnot. And I think I'll end with that because, as you know, I'm not interested in glorifying. Yes.
Oh, your presentation's done?
Almost.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to read one more paragraph. And then
okay.
I promise.
I misheard
okay.
you. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Okay. So the lot itself is limited to this north-south dimension this way, and that's part of what Brinkman Partners has to deal with this lot. And so the area between the 10-foot paved recreational trail within Outlot S and the Kylo property varies in width, but amounts to about 9,000 square feet of landscape area that provides substantial screening and shade of the parking areas of the property. And the space between the northwest edge of the trail and the MOB property includes 9 trees and 118 shrubs. The Kylo lot provides 13,585 square feet of open spaces, which amounts to 17% of the lot area. When you add the 9,000 square feet of additional open space provided immediately adjacent to that lot, the total nets 29,000 for the area. And so those are the raw numbers, and I just want to close with that. I do appreciate your time and allowing the presentation to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. Any questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Poland.
So is there a slide here that shows the number of parking spaces that you have versus the number of parking spaces that you are required to have?
Yes. Actually, I can speak to that. Okay. So this was going to be part of my presentation, but the parking is based on, first of all, the City of Longmont doesn't have minimum parking requirements for commercial development. We have maximum parking requirements. And for this type of use, it is capped at 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So this particular use is about 22,000 square feet gross floor area. And so the maximum amount of parking that they can have is 110 parking spaces, and that's what they provided.
Other questions of an informational measure? Commissioner Bruno?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Was there any thought of, since we're talking about the maximum allowed spaces here, was there any discussion of possibly losing a couple of those for more open space, or it really wouldn't make that much difference, right? It would impact the parking quite a bit to lose 2,000 square feet worth or whatever.
Chairman Shernick, Commissioner Bruno. Well, standard parking space is 9 by 18, so would have required quite a bit of reduction in terms of the amount of parking that they would have been able to provide in order to make up that 2,200 square feet. But they were also making up for the reduced amount of common open space in a couple of different ways. The first was, as Joel had mentioned, that there are 4 outlots on this particular Front Range Health and Wellness campus. And they're going to be a business owners association. All of the 4 separate owners will be paying into this business owners association in order to maintain those 4 separate lots. And they equal almost nearly 200,000 square feet of landscaping that they don't get direct credit for just by virtue of the fact that those specific outlots are not on their property. So as a result of that, we felt that that was additional justification, as Joel had mentioned, in Outlot S, which is the scenic entry overlay outlot immediately adjacent to Lot 7C. I had a slightly different number than Joel did, but it was over 8,000 square feet when you minus out the concrete trail. So they have about 8 to 9,000 plus square feet of common open space immediately adjacent to Lot 7C. And then there are the other remaining outlots, Outlot A, Outlot B, and Outlot P. Outlot A and B are going to be more for drainage-related purposes. Outlot P is for a detention pond. So they're going to be adding quite a bit. There's going to be quite a bit of common open space overall on this particular project on the campus. And then also, too, they will be adding additional landscape over and above what would be required if they provided 20% common open space.
Just to clarify, just to make sure I have this straight, because I got a little confused there. So there's a greater campus that is sort of its own entity. Within that campus are these lots 7, A, B, C, D. Those are different owners. They'll all be paying into a sort of a landscape program of the greater campus that essentially is more like a common area thing. And
Correction. Actually, they will be paying into a business owners association. That business owners association will be responsible for the care and maintenance of those outlots that I'd mentioned.
thank you.
Commissioner Height?
And it starts. Planner Ortiz, dovetailing on to Commissioner Bruno's observation, which is that the Front Range Health and Wellness Center, in my mind, is kind of a subdivision, and then there's individual lots within the subdivision. In developing or coming up with a subdivision for the larger wellness center and these outlots, were they required as part of their planning, master planning for this subdivision? The outlots, were they required as open space for the larger medical campus?
Commissioner Height. So the various outlots served a very specific purpose. A and B were included specifically to facilitate drainage on the site. And that would benefit the entire campus. Outlot P was a detention pond, and that would hold all of the storm water, and that too benefited the entire site. Outlot S is a scenic entry overlay landscape buffer. Within the scenic entry overlay, and this project is subject to that, there would normally be required to provide a 50-foot landscape buffer. As a result of some of the constraints on this site, when we came in for the preliminary plat, you may not have been here at that time, but they had requested variance on the scenic entry overlay landscape buffer, and they'd asked for a 30-foot landscape buffer instead of a 50-foot. And the Planning and Zoning Commission granted that. Now, in order to make up for that loss, what they did was they entered into an agreement with CDOT in order to to landscape the first 20 feet out in the CDOT right-of-way outside of that 30-foot scenic entry overlay. So each individual outlot does serve a very specific purpose, and we're required for this overall development.
Okay, and so then my follow-on questions are, first and foremost, have we ever allowed credit allowed a credit, so to speak, for outlot scenic ways or open space to be applied to an interior lot's open space requirements?
Commissioner Height, I can't recall a specific instance in which that occurred. I know in this case we were looking at a couple of things to justify the variance, and one is that they will actually be paying money to this Business Owners Association regularly in order to maintain those outlots. And so for that reason, we felt that they should be given some credit for that.
And then, I guess,
Actually, Commissioner Height, can we have Don Burchett chime in here? Okay.
Just real quick. So in residential subdivisions and in residential PUDs, we do allow for the outlots to count towards the open space requirements. What we typically see if we think of, say, the Harvest Junction development where Lowe's and Best Buy is located, for example, what they did is that instead of putting their scenic entry corridor in an outlot, the developer landscaped that first 50 feet on every lot and set it up so that when the first development came in, say the TGI Fridays, they didn't have to build that first 50 feet. It was already installed for them. And then they put in their building and all of their improvements, but they were required to then maintain that first 50 feet of their lot. But to give it good street appeal, they installed it. In this case, what Mr. Macy did is he took that 50 feet all along all three of those lots, put it into an outlot so that he could get it developed and look nice in case all of these buildings developed at a different time. They'd all be on their one irrigation system. It'd have continuity of design, and the installation would all be complete. And so the difference there is that in a situation like this, he didn't have to create outlots for that scenic entry. He chose to do it to try to show how the reduction from 50 feet to 30 feet would look, and to show the Planning Commission that that was a reasonable way to address the scenic entry corridor. If he wouldn't have done that, this lot would have included that area adjacent to the highway, and as Ben is explained and as Joel has tried to explain as well, is that additional 3,000? 8,000 square feet would be in the lot and would have exceeded any open space requirement. So that existing outlot where the scenic entry corridor was created just so that they could install that and have it all under one ownership and maintenance. It wasn't a requirement for the subdivision to be created. But we have had subdivisions where they have created these outlots and then taken credit for those as they move through the development. But usually in residential. That's usually where that happens when we do it in phases. They'll build a big pocket park in the middle, and then in the next phase they won't build a pocket park because they built a 4-acre pocket park and it's all in one area versus doing a bunch of little pocket parks. So that, I just wanted to clarify on that.
Thank you, Don.
And in the plat approval, was it contemplated at all that there would be credit, or that this outlot S would be part of the open space for these other lots, 7A, B, C, D?
I would say it was not when we were looking at it. Our look at it was that they were trying to put that area into this outlot to try to show the Planning Commission what they were willing to do for the scenic entry variance that they were asking for. Our assumption was that each lot, which all of the other lots so far have met their open space requirement, that's what we assumed would happen. But in this case, it didn't work out that way. And so we felt that taking credit for that adjacent area that they're paying funds into was a fair and equitable way to justify the variance.
Okay, then my kind of last question. Is it I read or I understand that Lot 7C is the smallest, the runt of the litter here. And my appreciation or understanding or expectation would have been that the lot purchaser, the developer of the Kilo Medical Center or Kilo Health Center, would have, should have, could have appreciated that he was going to have an open space obligation. Excuse me. And he's walked into this. And the 2,000 square feet that he's off, he's not making his building smaller. I don't know, I mean, I guess I understand or am led to understand that the building wouldn't otherwise be profitable without this extra 2,000 square feet?
Commissioner Hyde, yeah, it's a little over 2,000. We're looking at 2,300 square feet. Be otherwise required. So they are providing 17% common open space, and 20% common open space is required in this case.
Let me ask you one thing too, Ben. I guess, west boundary of C, which as it's contiguous with lot 7B, there's a funny jog. If 7C came straight down as opposed to angling back to the west, or I mean to the east, how many square feet is in that corner?
Commissioner Hyde, I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question. But I would suspect it would be somewhat more than 2,000 square feet.
Do you have any appreciation why it's configured the way it is?
Commissioner Hyde, I don't know the answer to that. Joel, do you have any recollection? I think he's talking about this. Yeah, I do know the job. He's here. Exactly what I'm talking about. I could scale it and give you a general idea in terms of how much space we're talking about.
I don't recall offhand. There was evolution with walks along this side and this side as well, and this side, and it might have been to align with some of the walks down on the southern portion, so that Derek, who's the owner from Texas for the skilled nursing facility on Lot 7B, would maintain his lot, and then the Brinkman partners, the people developing this lot, would be clear cut on that. I do remember the unique thing about this lot is that there's 4 purchasers, right? Don Macy has a lot 7A for future, and then the Frock is moving to 7B, Brinkman is 7C, and then skilled nursing is 7B. And to make the HOA and everything work, they had to have agreed shared and percentage costs. And so lines were drawn in the sand and outlots and all this. And so percentages were established, so when they could close, when the first one would close, everybody would know what percentage they would pay into this HOA, because that was very important for everyone. And it just so happened that Frock and the skilled nursing facility were coming in at the same time, which was really great because a lot of those details get flushed out. Lot 7C is a step behind, and so they were sort of scrambling after the fact. Now, so the plat went first, and then those square footages had to be established and set to establish those percentages. The more I think about it, there was an iteration where there was more parking that came in and actually went further west than is currently shown right now. And then the lot line jogged back to include those parking spaces, so they would include that. But this has been through 2 iterations since then, since the platting, which was about a year, 18 months ago. And also the fire department has had us do some sweeps and connectivity so the truck can pass through all the adjacent lots, not just on the private drive up there, but through the lots to enable their ladders to do that. So that's my best recollection is the concept development of this lot is why the line sort of went. But the plat was established early on just so they can have their hard, what am I buying, what's this outlot, and then the percentage could be established, and then there was sort of set in stone, and then the development happened from there. So that was not a brief answer, but hopefully it answered your question.
Sorry. Is there no way to make this thing work with 2,000 less square feet of building?
I do not know offhand what skilled nursing facility has as far as their open space. Their building's more of a plus building, so there's lots of quadrants that have abundance of open space. There's a lot of frontage on the front and on the east side, and of course there's a lot of open space for the detention pond that collects everything for the 20 acres. But I can't say offhand what, I know net we're about 25% overall between just the lots, not the outlots, of the athletic club, skilled nursing, and Kylo and the Frog. So we're not skinning by on each one. This, as you said, is sort of the runt of the last one to go in, and so they're putting their building in that last lot. So.
Commissioner Bruno.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Don, just to kind of clarify something in my mind. So the greater campus owner developer who got the variance for the scenic right-of-way, that looks like it applies to 7. It disappeared on me, but it looks like it was 7B, D, and C maybe were sort of impacted by that variance. So, am I correct in assuming that if they had not done that, each one of these individual owners would basically be in a situation where they would have to get that variance made if the lines were just drawn all the way out to the end there?
That's correct, assuming that the design of their parking lot or their building location didn't give them the full 50 feet that they needed. Because in some cases, as in the Stone Gate nursing facility that's to the west, the T-shaped building that Joel was just talking about, they're set back far enough, and their parking was generally set back far enough that they could have had the 50-foot corridor on their property and met the requirement and not needed the variance. This property, as you can see, is built right up to the edge of their property line, which means that they need that variance from the 50-foot scenic entry corridor. But if it would have been, this property would have been included, the outlot would have been included in this lot, they would not necessarily need a variance for open space, they would need it for the scenic entry, as you just said.
Okay, yeah, that was sort of what I was thinking, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is a public hearing item, so we need to see if there is any public who would like to speak. Nobody has signed up. Is there anybody in the audience? Nobody is here, so we will close the public hearing portion of this and go back to questions and answers. Commissioner Pollan.
Am I correct in, did I see it correctly, that the gross square footage of this building lot, just the building itself, is approximately 22,000 feet? Oh.
Commissioner Pollan, that's correct. It's a little over 22,000 square feet. The footprint of the building is a little over 11,000 square feet, and it's a 2-story building, and it's roughly 39 feet tall.
Okay, and I'm getting to this because to try to get our hands around the impact of trying to meet this size. So really, by trying to take away 2,200 square feet, we would really be taking approximately 4,400 square feet of space, because it'd be actually 2 stories worth.
If you doubled the footprint, I think that would be accurate.
Ben, let's jump back a bit. We didn't have a presentation by you. So we've obviously lost some details along the way, including what the staff recommendation is and what your rationale is behind that. Would you care to please go through that part for us at this time?
Sure. So this was kind of a general breakdown on some of the aspects of the project. We touched on the parking. The parking, as I had noted earlier, is for commercial developments. We have maximum parking requirements versus minimum parking requirements, and it's based on a square footage. So there would be 5 parking spaces, a ratio of 5 parking spaces per 1,000 gross square feet of floor area. So in this case, they max out at 110 spaces. They have 35 full-time employees on staff at any given time. And so the remainder would be for their customers and their patients. Now, the common open space requirement, again, is based on it's a 20% common open space requirement. That is based on the gross square footage of the property. That's not the building, that's not the property area minus the building. That is the entire property area, excluding anything that's been put on the property. Given that the trees and shrubs that are required are based on the amount of common open space. So it's really what is required in this case is 1 tree and 5 shrubs per 750 square feet of common open space. And so that for a 20% common open space requirement, that equals 21 trees, and that's actually supposed to be 38 shrubs. 38 trees. 21 trees are provided. 21 trees are required, and 105 shrubs are also required. Now, what they've provided, however, is 38 trees on this site and 291 shrubs. Now, that is more than what would be required if they provided the full amount, the full 20% of common open space. And again, remember that the numbers of trees and shrubs that are required is based on the common open space that's required, 1 tree and 5 shrubs per 750 square feet of common open space. So again, the amount of common open space that's required for this site is 15,822 square feet, and that equals 20%, and what they have provided is 17%, or 13,585 square feet. So really there were 2 things that we were looking at in order to justify the variance. The first was the numbers of trees and shrubs that they provided, which exceeds what they would normally be required to provide, assuming they provided the full amount of common open space. And the other is that they're paying into this business owners association, which will be responsible for the care and upkeep of all of the common open space on the facility, and the common open space immediately adjacent to Outlot, or Lot 7C, is somewhere between 8 and 9,000 square feet.
Ben, I have a question for you in regards to this. The extra trees and shrubs that they'd be providing, was that what they wanted to do before they knew that there would need to be a variance, or was that part of what they were willing to do as sort of a trade-off in relation to the variance?
Chairman Schernick, actually, when we were having the preliminary discussions about this project and then going back to the preliminary plat, we had a lot of discussions with respect to common open space and the amounts of trees and shrubs. And so it just sort of worked out that way that this is what they ultimately wound up providing. The way we look at it is it wasn't necessarily intentional as their justification to provide to make up for the variance, but in looking at it, they're providing significantly more trees. We're looking at 17 additional trees and well over 100 additional
186 extra shrubs.
quite a few extra shrubs, and so we felt that made the project better by virtue of the additional foliage, and we felt that was at least a justification, whether it was intentional or not.
Okay. So back to a question that was asked earlier, I believe Commissioner Poland. So you mentioned that parking spaces are 9 feet by 18 feet, which by my math is 162 square feet. We're shy on the common open space by about 2,200 square feet. So that works out to about 14 spaces. So 14 spaces out of 110 is just a little over 10%, which some might see as not a very big reduction. And that 110 is a maximum. So there's no reason we have to give them the maximum. So wouldn't it be less? I mean, we could do away with the variance if we just said, don't build a maximum. Do 14 fewer spaces. You meet your open space requirement. End of story. So why aren't we going down that road?
Chairman Shernick, their argument is that they need all the spaces for their business operation. And so that is something that we've continuously heard throughout this process.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Poland, or Bruno.
I just have a quick one. I think most of these lots are sort of at some point along in this process, and there's the one with the fitness facility. I think that one hasn't really gone through it, right? So how are the other lots doing on open space? Have they all met it or exceeded it, or what?
Commissioner Bruno. So Lot 7C did meet their common open space. 7D, excuse me. That's the Front Range Health and Wellness Facility immediately to the northeast, and it abuts this lot on the northeast. They did meet their common open space requirement. I can't speak to Lot 7B, unfortunately, which was the Stonegate Skilled Nursing Facility. I didn't work on that specific project. Lot 7A, we have not received an application for that project yet, so we have no specifics other than it is intended to be a fitness aquatics facility. But I can speak to 7D. They have met their common open space requirement. The lot is somewhat larger as well. If you were to look at the plat, and Lot 7D is 140,948 square feet. Lot 7C is 79,108 square feet. And then Lot 7B, the Stonegate Skilled Nursing Facility, is 171,193 square feet. And then Lot 7A, which will ultimately have the fitness and aquatics facilities, at 253,136 square feet. So the Lot 7C is definitely constrained in terms of its size compared to the others. Don just informed me that Lot 7B had 38% common open space.
So Ben, I'm going to go back to the parking spaces again. We had another project a while back where the applicant, this was I think the BioLife folks over by Harvest Junction, and the applicant said we need the maximum parking. And the argument by staff at the time was, well, this is why we now have maximums instead of minimums, because we don't believe that most commercial uses actually have to go to the maximum. And what we did for those folks was we said we're going to phase the parking. Okay, so after a year's tenancy at their site, and after staff evaluation of seeing how much parking was being used, it would be determined whether they could build out more parking or not. Why don't we take this approach with this? I mean, in other words, why give a variance? Why not phase the parking instead? My point is that I'm not convinced we've exhausted all possible methods and possible approaches, and we're jumping to a variance too soon.
Chairman Chernick, it's certainly the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission to make that a condition of approval if that's how you want to go.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Goldberg.
Hey, Ben, would you mind, I just didn't feel like I got to see the rest of the presentation, or maybe you didn't get to fully finish your thoughts. Could you at least just finish up with what the city staff's recommendation is and maybe clarify what the outstanding conditions are with your recommendation?
Sure, be happy to. Staff's recommendation was to approve with conditions on the condition that the applicant make any remaining changes on the plans. There are still some minor additions that need to be made on the plan, so it's nothing really significant. We just want to make sure that they do that. Again, you've heard our rationale for our recommendation. We would be recommending PZR 2016-22B, which is approved with conditions on the condition that the applicant make any remaining changes on the plans.
Another question. So if the variance were denied, well, first off, we're doing a conditional use site plan and variance, and so the PZR does not split those apart. So let's clarify that first. So if there were an approval, we're approving both. If it's conditional, it's for both. If it's a denial, it's denying both. So we could do a conditional PZR that approves the site plan but denies the variance. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to clarify what.
Chairman Chernick, yeah, the commission could decide to split the applications into two. We would then just have to create new resolutions for the approvals for you, but you could make motions to approve the site plan and deny the variance request. You could approve the conditional use site plan and make it a condition that the approval is subject to a phased parking scenario, as you talked about with BioLife. That would, and then you could just, by doing that, the variance then for the parking is, depending on how you phrased your approval, could be similar to what we did with BioLife. In other words, if they can show that the need is there for that additional parking, they can work with staff to come back in and construct that. But so therefore the variance is, quote, approved. But if not, then the landscaping requirement is met because those spaces have been removed and it meets the open space requirement. So you could probably do it all with the conditional, the B version of the PZR. You would just need to be clear in what you're approving and what the conditions are so that we can adjust that PZR for signatures.
Right. And if we denied the variance and did not have a phasing of the parking, and the only way that they met the open space was by eliminating parking, and then they came back to the city and they said, wow, we really truly do have a need for 14 more spaces, then what is their option?
So as I understand it, you're saying that the Planning Commission votes tonight, as an example, to approve this conditional use but deny the request for the open space.
Right.
They then come in and have an option. One option is that they could appeal the decision up to City Council. So that would be the first option that they would have, and make no changes to their plan, and then ultimately City Council would make a determination. The second option then would be that they would have, if they wanted to come back, they construct the project, and in 6-9 months they determine that they need those additional spaces, they would still be limited for a year from the date of the denial before they could make a reapplication for another variance. So that would be limited in our development code, because once a variance is denied, no similar application can be made for 1 year from the date of denial. So they would have to wait until the 1 year had expired, then they could apply again to the city for it, and then we could bring that up as an amendment to the site plan for those additional spaces. It would be a variance coming back to the Planning Commission again, and then you would hear it again and make a decision, and you could base it on any evidence at that time that they've presented for the need for the additional parking spaces.
Okay, thank you, Don. Commissioner Height?
Further to that, Ben, has there been any discussion with the applicant over a phased parking program?
Commissioner Height, we have not had those discussions.
Mr. Siemens, would it behoove you to want to think about that before you got a denial? If you got a denial?
I was doing some of the calculations too with the 9x18 and 162, and checks out at 14 spaces, and we're talking about sort of the ratios of the need for spaces per medical use for that. Being a civil engineer, I'm not too familiar with the different ratios with medical versus retail versus grocer or warehouse or what have you. I do understand there's the current ratio is about 200, one space for every 200 is what it flushes out to for this site. So it'd be the 22,000 square feet and the 110 spots. So it's 1 per 200. Their fear is that, and speaking for them because they're not here, but is that the site would not, it'd be sort of an eventuality that they would come and grant that. Now, Ben, one thing I was thinking about, as part of the plat, is there shared parking between the lots? Was that established? Should I turn off?
To answer Joel's question, there wasn't a shared parking agreement explored amongst the tenants. However, that is an option that they can choose to do. We did raise that to them, to some of the other tenants. I believe this one as well, and that was something that they chose to not pursue. But it is certainly something that is an option for them.
Having talked to David Demchek with Front Range Orthopedic, who's Lot 7D, he's very anxious about utilizing all of his spaces, and Derek has a similar concern about his spaces, so I'm not sure. My point being is, if those 14, like for example, the furthest away would be the most logical to phase if they were to go that route in that southern corner. If those would be phased out, they potentially couldn't be used to help, for example, Derek's lot, the skilled nursing facility, which is the most adjacent to that. Now, I'm not sure they'll set signs out there and say, do not park here, this is lot 7C, because in reality, you just park. It's sort of like for tonight, it's hard to get a parking space. You just park where you can, and it's a no-fee parking area. And I'm sure that would be a similar situation for this neighborhood. And so it'd sort of speak to, okay, Frock's jammed all the time. Skilled nursing is also full out on parking. How are we going to fit all the cars? And they'll come, clients will come with parking histories like, we need this spot because we built it in other places and we need that, and this won't work here, or something of that nature. So I'm just trying to play the view of the client in those last couple of paragraphs.
Commissioner Flagg.
Good. My question was concerning the parking as well, but one of the things that in the skilled nursing home, they have shift work, correct?
Yes, Derek does say there's shift work, but I didn't come prepared to discuss.
No, I have an understanding of shift work such that not all the spaces will ever be all utilized by virtue of the fact that there is an exchange of shifts, and they have to accommodate that by the amount of parking. So that at some point during the day, there are going to be spaces fairly, a whole shift worth, essentially, that will be unoccupied and available for someone else to park in. And as long as by the time the shift changes, there's an availability, it does work out.
That's an excellent point. I do not know if the number of parking spaces for Lot 7B included, like, so everybody parks okay in the shift change, so there's more than enough parking, or if there's just enough to make that shift change, or I know skilled nursing facilities and memory care and some of the other facilities that Don Macy has, they get an abundance of Mother's Day and Thanksgiving and all these holiday visits, and they're like parking in Saran and all the other places where they just can't get enough parking on these seasonal spaces. But to answer your question, I do not know how that lot was. They do have shift parking, but I don't know how it was calculated to cover. Sure, you bet.
So additionally, Mother's Day doesn't come every day, and it's on a weekend. And usually the offices that we're looking at in the parcel that we're looking at today, probably they don't have office hours on the weekends.
Well, my mother would contend that it should happen every week, so like a Sunday or something. But yeah, that's true. It's very seasonal. The holidays, their busiest visit times, from what Don Macy tells me, is Mother's Day, the 3-day weekends, the Thanksgiving weekend, the Christmas and Easter are some of those weekends that they come to, and Father's Day, of course. Not to rule out fathers.
If I could also add, in order for Lot 7C to gain access to the lots, to the parking on Lot 7B, it would necessitate a contractual agreement between the owner of Lot 7C and then Lot 7B. And there's a little bit of uncertainty right now because we don't, with respect to that, because we don't know whether the owners of Lot 7B, the Stonegate Skilled Nursing Facility, would agree to that. So, and a shared parking agreement is certainly something that could be pursued. Unfortunately, if the adjacent lot owners are not amenable to that, then that won't be an option to Lot 7C.
Commissioner Flagg.
It has been my observation that generally people parking for businesses park where they need to park, regardless of any contractual obligations between owners of parcels.
That's true.
Other comments, discussions, thoughts? Any motions, ideas about motions? Commissioner Flake.
I liked our chair's concept of looking at the parking as a possible movable thing, since they are asking for the maximum parking on the site, and that we see how it goes, because they may discover that they don't need the number of parking, and that we do phase such that they could put in all the parking that will fit and allow them to do their open space landscaping and reserve the 14 to be phased at a later date. I had another question regarding construction schedule in terms of our deciding to perhaps not agree for the variance this evening. Is that probably there's grading? How long will it take for the building to be put up? And so on.
If it's similar construction to the Frock building, it's a potential open to close about 14 months from foundation to CO. It depends how nice Mark Sampson is. No, I'm just teasing. But I do not know when their start schedule is. We, Don Macy and Todd Parker and myself, talk often to see the latest on said developments. So I don't know when the start would be. Yep.
Commissioner Pollak.
In looking at this map and looking at that bottom section, and there were the extras, there are the extra parking spaces there. There's a row of 8, and then there's a couple others. But in looking at the bigger map off from that, it looks like the outlot S opens up on that bottom portion. Is there a particular reason why it just didn't stay a skinny border along the whole way, and they didn't take a bigger slice of that triangle at the bottom? Yeah, I'm looking off of part of our communication.
Yeah, if you look at the plat.
Part of the issue was that they were one of the reasons why it's shaped that way is that while the scenic entry overlaid landscape buffer is required to be 50 feet, they provided 30 feet. And so one of the things that we look at in determining the whether or not we can support a reduction in width like that is the overall girth in terms of the overall amount of common open space that's provided. And so we frequently, if a landscape buffer is smaller in some areas and wider in some areas, but in the aggregate gets close to what they would be required to provide, then we're amenable to providing some flexibility in terms of the width that would be provided. So in this case, they have that small section there on the southwest corner. It adds substantial amounts of open space to the overall scenic entry overlay landscape buffer that we would normally not be able to get if it was just a 30-foot strip, the full length, and nothing else. So in terms of the design of it, let me just take a quick look at the plat here. It's fine. Yeah, feasibly, they could have changed the configuration of Lot 7C and have it come down a tad bit. but then we would have lost some on the scenic entry overlay landscape buffer. And they were already seeking a variance on that, and again, we were able to justify that because in the aggregate, the total amount of common open space associated with that was greater as a result of that extra chunk there. And plus, and on top of that, then they also used CDOT right-of-way, which they're going to be landscaping.
Commissioner Goldberg?
Hey, Ben, can you talk about, maybe moving away from this project specifically, but what is the real intention behind the common open space requirement? You know, what are the roots of it? What are we trying to make sure we protect here as it relates to this property, and as we make sure we don't compromise that?
Commissioner Goldberg, I think that's a very good question. Well, I guess what I would say is consider two scenarios. So the first scenario is one in which there are no trees, there are no shrubs, there are no parking lot islands. You have nothing but a large sea of concrete. The second scenario is there are parking lot islands every 10 spaces to break up the concrete. You have trees and shrubs around the perimeter of the property. And it just the second scenario, it makes the property much more attractive. And let's not forget the benefit of adding trees and shrubs and ground cover in terms of cleaning the air and just visual attractiveness. So it's important. I mean, we don't want to minimize that. But in keeping that sort of philosophy in mind, we were looking at the numbers of trees and shrubs that they provided over and above what would normally be required if they provided 20% common open space. To us, that was a selling point.
Commissioner Goldberg.
So I guess I'll shoot the question back at the commission, and that is, you know, in the past we have offered maybe what I would call goodwill points or goodwill credit for a developer who is in a jam but has done their best, and whether they have done their best in this case is up to us to decide over the next few minutes, that has done their best or made intention to meet the interest of the condition or of the criteria, but maybe are unable to meet it perfectly. So in this case, the number of trees, 38 instead of 21, the number of shrubs, 291 over 105, the aggressive landscaping done kind of in the total amount along the entire length of the project. I wonder what the rest of the commission thinks about is this project meeting the intention to not have a concrete, parking lot desert, if you will, or by granting this variance, are we perhaps enabling that kind of barren wasteland, or has the developer proposed something that kind of meets the goal and the intention of the condition we're discussing?
Commissioner Bruno.
I'll just jump in. I feel sort of bad for the specific developer of Lot 7C. Kind of seems like he's sort of getting squeezed into a spot here. One of the things that I keep coming back to is right next to this lot, there's already been a variance of 20 feet of scenic byway that's already disappeared. That's the greater campus developer. It's not 7C. But in my mind, I guess I hesitate to just keep giving those away in this particular spot, and to also, like you were saying, sort of enable this sort of thing in the future, like, oh, well, we got that, let's just go for this too type of thing. And I'm having a hard time with it, especially with the max parking, some other things. I wouldn't want that little corner of S to necessarily go away either, but I'm on the fence, but that's just kind of how I feel about it personally, is I feel like if that scenic byway hadn't been taken away, I think I would say no problem. But just to kind of keep going with that sort of depleting that is maybe just not sitting right with me.
Commissioner Poland.
Yeah, I think, because I think I was here when we did the scenic byway, and I think part of that was because of the CDOT had extra space already there, and that's why they requested is because they already lost space to CDOT along 119. So there's already 20 feet, I think, that CDOT had. And they said, really, you have 50 feet, but 20 of it isn't ours because CDOT has it right away. And that's why they went ahead and they made the agreement with CDOT that we'll maintain the 20 feet. It's still CDOT's 20 feet, but it's maintained 20 feet. It isn't just 30 feet from 119. There's extra another 20 feet, I believe it is, landscaped. So I really am torn about this. I mean, I feel, because with all the outlots, the whole property as a whole has more than enough open space. It's just this, as you said, the per guy at 7C is kind of squeezed here. And really, I am torn on how I feel about that. I mean, is the way to go maybe doing a conditional where we say, you know what, maybe don't do all the parking spaces and we'll take a look if you show the need, like we did before. If you show the need, then you can go ahead and meet with the city and say, hey, look, we're certain times of the day we don't have the parking. If you can prove it, I'm thinking maybe that's the way to go with this. Because that southern part, it's easy to take out those parking spaces and it would be easy to put them in at a later time.
Commissioner Teta.
I have a question for Planner Ortiz. Ben, if we were to do something like that where we phased the parking, would that potentially negate the additional landscaping that they're talking about providing?
Commissioner Teta, no, it would not. That landscaping is going to remain as is. Are you referring to the outlots? And
I mean the 38 trees and the 291 shrubs specifically.
Commissioner Teta, no, that would not change. The numbers of trees and shrubs that they'll be providing, well, it'll probably actually they'll either need to take the additional trees and shrubs that they're providing and then move them onto the extra additional landscaping that you would be requiring of them. And then should they demonstrate a need later that they need those additional parking spaces, then they would be required to either relocate those trees or plant additional to replace them. But we would not see a reduction in trees and shrubs.
So you just brought up a point that makes the conditional idea much more complicated. It's not exactly easy for the developer to put in more spaces and moving trees after they're planted. It's very likely it'll die. So it's not quite just, well, we can just put those spaces back in again. What has our maximum parking code has been around now for what, 2 years? I've lost track of time. What's been the feedback, and how are we doing with that? Is everybody always going for the max? Is your estimate that it's working? And this is as much a question for Don. He's starting to ponder it.
Chairman Chernak, I was going to look and try and get the date for you. What I would say is that we've seen probably both ends of the parking spectrum. In other words, we have had a lot of the newer developments, more of the greenfield developments that have come in and wanted to get the maximum amount of parking. I think that relates a lot of times to getting funding for a project to be able to show the bank that if they build this building and the business that's going in it were to fail, that it is leasable for other uses that would accommodate maybe a need for more parking than what this building in its current use would use. And so oftentimes that's what we hear as kind of the feedback to why they feel they need more parking, okay? Now, when we see more of the infill development or redevelopment, this is where the standard of the parking maximum has really helped, because now we have the ability for someone to buy an existing building in an area where they are very limited on parking on the property, but they feel that the way their business model works, either people in the neighborhood will walk or bike to the area or could park on the street and use the on-street parking, versus telling them that you have to provide 20 spaces or you can't have your business there. And they're saying, I think I only need 10. I think I can make it work with 10. So we've seen both ends of it come in, but the feedback that we most often get is really more of a finance question of, I may not be able to get my project financed if I don't have this number of parking spaces to show the bank that if for some reason my business doesn't go and they end up with the building, that they have a building that has enough parking for a user that may require 1 per 1,000 square, or say 10 per 1,000 versus 5 per 1,000 or 4 per 1,000. There's that ability for them to show that it could be leased for something else. And I do know that when Phil set these numbers, when Phil Greenwald looked at these numbers, we built in about a 10% increase above what our original standards were. In other words, if it's currently set at 5 per 1,000 is the most you can build, the original use was most likely set at 4 under our old parking standards. Okay? So we tried to build in an increase to give people and some additional parking in these maximums, because we knew that there were people that needed to get to a little bit higher than what our code said they needed. But we were hoping to, give a little bit on that upper end so that we wouldn't have to have variances for parking. And so far, I think we've done pretty good. I think BioLife is the only one that I recall that's really come in that's wanted to exceed it. And again, we worked out a solution on that. So that's what I've got. But I think it's close to 2 years that we've had these in place now.
Thank you, Don, for reminding me that the BioLife example that I brought up, they were wanting to exceed the maximum.
Yes, they were.
This applicant is not, so that's a big difference. I had another thought, but it's escaped me. Any other comments? Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, I am equally challenged on this project as maybe the rest of the commission. I'd like to be abundantly clear, though. My concern, my decision on whether to support this variance is not related to the poor little guy who got stuck with the property. It's, I don't want to project it as like this person got shafted or that darn developer. What I want to be abundantly clear is that if I'm in support of this variance, it's because the intent of the condition, the intent of the criteria has been met, and I would be convincing myself that they have done their best to meet the intent with extra trees, extra shrubbery, and then the shared outlots that are also providing more than the required amount of common space if you looked at it as a whole project. So I don't want this to be about the poor little developer. I want it to be about whether we are meeting the intention here.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldberg. Commissioner Height.
I struggle. I realize this is a uniquely shaped lot, which is one of the criteria that we have to find to be able to grant a variance. But I also come down to the fact that this particular builder, this lot owner, has created his own problem. The size of his building and the configuration of his parking is his own doing. And that is one of the criteria that negates being able to grant him a variance. I also am not convinced, too, that granting the variance is the least obtrusive. I don't think that that's the right word. Is the last step that we have to be able to make for this project to go forward. I don't know how you conditionally approve a variance to phase in parking, but apparently you guys have done it before, which is brilliant. I don't know if we're ready to do that yet either. I hate to deny a variance to a person who then has to wait a year to come back. But as Commissioner Flagg had pointed out, it's going to take a year to build this thing anyhow. So maybe they come back in a year. I can't support it, is my position.
I'm starting to think that the idea of phasing the parking doesn't make a lot of sense, given the construction schedule for it. You know, I mean, that if we deny the variance and it takes them a year to build it anyway, then they can still come back. That's not making sense, is it? Yeah, the phasing of the parking, I personally don't think it makes sense to have the developer have to take trees out, move everything around, redo it. I mean, I'd rather see just deny the variance or go for it. But I agree with Commissioner Height that not all possible solutions have been examined by the design, and they could resolve it. To me, it looks as though we need to do a conditional PZR that would basically, because we haven't talked about the conditional use site plan. I don't have any problems with the conditional use site plan. I think the site plan's fine. Problem is the variance, the fact that these are tied together in one PZR. We would have to do a conditional, in my mind, a conditional PZR to approve the site plan but deny the variance. Any other discussion? Sorry, I'm not being as clear as I try to be most times. Commissioner Height.
Maybe I need Ben or Don a point of clarification. The conditional site plan has 110 parking spaces in it. And no, how can we approve that and deny the variance?
I think Duncan alluded to that earlier, is you would need to create a second condition on PZR 22B, which would be the conditional approval of the application. Is that?
And removing 14 spaces.
And then removing 14 spaces and replacing that with landscaping.
Right.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to say that their only way to solve it is by removing parking spaces. There are other ways to solve this, right? Okay, let me take a shot at PZR. What are we? I don't even have the number in front of me. PZR 2016-22B, that we would keep in place the staff's condition that other small items be corrected, but we would add a condition that the basically that the necessary amount of open space, the required amount of open space be provided. And then it would be determined by staff and the development services manager that that condition had been met. Does that pass legal muster?
I have a question.
Commissioner Flake.
My question relates to Section 1. Under 1.2, said application was found to be complete through the DRC review process. Now, if we have, in our discussions, determined that there are some other remedies that the applicant has not pursued so that the open space requirement can be met and the parking that they want can still be done, doesn't that sort of run contrary to what this states?
So Chairman Chernak, Commissioner Flagg, so looking at PZR 2016-22B, if we look at the line section 1.5, so what the commission currently has discussed as a motion would be that that line, that number would need to be amended. So what the Planning Commission is saying is that the said application conforms to the applicable requirements of section 15.02.040, which is the common review criteria for the application, and 1502.050C, which is the conditional use criteria. But it does not, so we would need to strike 15.02050J5 because that's the variance criteria of the Land Development Code. And then we would need to add that the commission is denying probably a 1.6. The commission finds or denies the request for the variance, finding that the review criteria 15.02.050.J.5 have not been met. We would need the commission to explain what the justification is for why you do not find those met. If it's that criteria C, self-imposed hardship is the reason, then you would state that and explain why you believe that's, so we have something in the record to explain why you made that finding. And if you believe there are other review criteria they didn't meet for that variance, you need to, again, identify those for us and explain why they don't meet those review criteria. So if you do that, I think that what you've talked about with 22B would meet the needs for approving the conditional use site plan and denying the variance for the landscape.
Okay. Since I made the motion, I agree with everything that Don just said in terms of all the numbers. The reason would be that the variance, let's see, that it is a self-imposed hardship, that they have not taken into account all possible design options. And also, one of our conditions, or one of our criteria is a variance may allow only the least deviation from the regulations that will afford relief. The variance that's been proposed is not the least deviation. It is more than the least deviation. The least deviation would be, for example, to eliminate 14 parking spaces. So those criteria are not met. Anybody else help me out on criteria?
I agree with those
Okay,
two.
all right. So other commissioners agree on those two. Do we need more than those two, Don?
Technically, the commission only needs one review criteria not to be met in order to make a finding that the variance or the application itself isn't justified.
Okay. So does everybody understand what the motion is that's on the floor? And what it,
And I second it.
okay, it's been seconded by Commissioner Flagg. Further discussion. Commissioner Poland.
Don, do we need to put the reasons, a quick summation of the reason why we feel D and F were not met in part of 22B?
So I believe Commissioner Chernak provided some explanation in his motion that he just made. It may be beneficial for the commission to, if people can agree or confirm or feel there's additional evidence or justification for why that decision is being made, to enter that into the record. I think it's helpful, but I don't know that I don't know if it's necessary. My counterpart here may believe it is. So, but I do believe we've done that in the past, where people have gone around to explain their thought or feelings of why they're going to vote for or against a motion.
Okay. Anybody want to chime in that regard? Commissioner Height?
I can reiterate what I said before, to the extent we need to clarify the record, which is, I do believe it's a self-imposed hardship, and that there may be alternatives that have not been explored that are other options that don't require granting a variance. For instance, changing the number of parking spaces, entering into parking agreements with others.
Reducing the size of the building.
Reducing the size of the building, yeah, it's a third one. Thanks.
Commissioner Bruno?
I mean, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell from my point of view.
Okay. I also would like to just chime in quickly and say that I think the applicant has made a really good faith effort, like Commissioner Goldberg was mentioning before, and we recognize the goodwill. But you know, in this case, the terms of the criteria for a variance aren't being met. Commissioner Goldberg, you had something to say?
No, I'll just be echoing similar sentiments. Although, you know, I lean towards good faith efforts, and I acknowledge that the amount of trees and shrubs are far exceed the requirement, and I recognize that the outlot landscaping has provided quite a bit to the greater project, but because there are other reasonable, less intrusive, or what is the least deviating options to resolve this without gifting a variance, I'll be in support of the motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Let's take a vote. And the motion passes 7-0. So I'll read the notice here. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, October 27 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, November 2 at 5 p.m. Mr. Siemens, thank you very much for taking your time to be here and explain the project tonight. Ben, thank you for your time and effort. We will move on. I need my agenda. Okay, this is a public hearing. We have the final call for public invited to be heard. Jane, no one signed up. No one has signed up. Is there anybody in the audience? I see no one in the audience wishing to be heard. We'll close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the commission? Seeing no items from the commission, we'll move on to items from Council Representative Bonnie Finlay. She has nothing. Okay. Items from our Planning and Development Services Director or Principal Planner, Don Burchett. However, he has stepped away. So I think, given the fact that he did not have items previously.
We need to know if we're going to put that on the schedule for next month.
Yeah, well, we don't really know what's on the schedule for next month. Next month's meeting, I can point out at the bottom of our agenda, it points, Jane has kindly listed our dates, which is our next meeting would be November 16, and there's no special meeting ever scheduled in the month of November because it would conflict with Thanksgiving, most likely. So if we do have a meeting in November, it'll be November 16. And Jane is saying we will have a meeting. Okay, we will take that in place of items from Don Burchett. And our last item is adjournment. Unless anybody is opposed, we are adjourned.